expenses. How could you make this happen for your employees?
Tax write-offs.
What ways could you help with travel expenses?
Giving them miles.
Giving them miles, okay? Or giving them your car, meaning a company car.
A demo.
Get the
What
hotel.
A demo.
Yeah.
A demo car. That's
Okay.
what they do.
For dealerships is.
Okay. So you got to figure out how you're going to have a company car. Are you going to have a lot of your own company cars, or are you going to go the other version, right? So kind of depends on what your company is too, right? So when the NAIA comes for women's basketball or volleyball, they would do the car thing through the local companies, right? They would lease them out, right? Because NAIA wouldn't have just a bunch of cars that they would truck along with them. But then we look around at in town here, and what are company cars that you see?
Wells.
Exit.
Wells.
Enterprise.
Pizza Ranch. What?
Exit.
Exit.
Oh yeah, that's
Langles, right?
Casey's.
Casey's.
Pizza. We're being delivered.
Okay, when they
Jerry's, they have that white car.
Okay.
We have the white car and the Jeep.
Langles then, like electric. Greenway would have company cars, right? So the next thought process is, how do we allow the use of that car?
Probably take a class, of course.
Okay. But meaning, yeah, I understand what you're getting at, but I'm getting at how, so if you work for me and I give you a company vehicle, what is his allowances for that vehicle?
Like the gas.
Okay? Does he get to use it on the weekends?
It goes by miles.
Now, obviously, he's probably not going to want to drive around a company van or something that has tools in the back and that kind of stuff. But if it was just a car, okay, so Dylan's selling something for our company, and so he's got to travel all around. Does he still get to use that car? Meaning on the weekends. But, so that's one thought process. And if you say yes, okay, now you got to think about Dylan, Friday night, after work, where's Dylan going to go?
Bar, art.
He's going to go to the bar or a restaurant, right? So if he goes to a restaurant and he has a few cocktails and then goes home, but he runs into a pole,
Fine.
now what happens?
Nothing.
Right?
Wrap around the pole while I'm going.
Okay?
You
But you gotta think about those kind of things, right?
Certain insurance.
Okay, so there's probably a special insurance, right? So to kind of build off of that, my dad used to work for a company in Cedar Rapids, even when he lived in Mobile. Okay, so he would travel to Cedar Rapids a couple times, like at the beginning of the week, and then come home at the end of the week. But at the end of the week, he could use the van or car or whatever for his own personal use. All right? So anytime that we went somewhere, he always made sure that he drove. So he didn't want anybody else to, or the company to have that liability. Now, again, he's anal about that kind of stuff because he's an insurance guy. So he knows kind of the rules and stuff. But you got to think about all that stuff. Okay? What else can we help with? So we're talking about it. We've already talked about transportation. What else could we give?
Gas.
Gas?
Yeah,
Part of the transportation, though, right?
Tools.
Okay. Room, a board, right? Where are we going to sleep? Where are we going to do that kind of stuff?
Sometimes they pay for your food,
Okay, sometimes food, right?
plane ticket.
Maybe a plane ticket.
The Air Force says like if you have to come back to Sioux City for drill weekends, they pay 50 cents a mile, and then if you want a roommate, you don't have to pay. Or like if you want a roommate, you don't have to pay for the room, but if you want their stuff, you pay like half of it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's what they do.
So we talked about mileage. We talked about room and board, basically. Okay, so here's the next thing. Is this a nightly stipend? Meaning they tell you that you're going to be able to room, or you can, they set it all up, right? they have a contract through Marriott. So it's pretty easy for them to make rooms or get rooms for you. Okay, that's one way of doing it, right? Another way of doing it would be saying, well, here's a certain amount of money. So here's $150. Okay? So you can stay wherever you want. If it's over $150, then you got to pay the rest. If it's under, how does that money get turned back in? Or do you get that money? Is that kind of like an incentive for you, or a little extra bonus? Same thing with your meals, right? So let's say they give you $25 a meal. Well, Yah's going to Hardee's for the monster ginormous burger. So he actually gets 2 of them, so he's already just pushing his $25, right? Bunk, on the other hand, is like, I just want some donuts. So she only spends $7, so she has $18 left. Again, is that her money then? Does she have to turn that back in? That's what you got to think about if you're the business owner, right? Okay.
I feel like if they have to turn it in, they're just gonna use it all up anyways, compared to.
Right.
So you're gonna lose it.
Okay. So, but then Bunk for supper time wants to take out her significant other, and for supper they give her $25 too. So can she use the extra that she had, or if she goes over the 25 and she's out, then she probably has to pay for her own.
You can get like a company card.
Or they can give you a company card, right? So the company card's kind of a real fragile thing also, right? Because you can get in a lot of trouble with the company card, right? Especially again if we're going out for cocktails, okay? Or we want to wine and dine somebody, so we take them to a real nice restaurant. Well, what you got to remember is a bottle of wine could cost you $500. Now all of a sudden we're on our 5th bottle of wine and we haven't even started hors d'oeuvres yet, right? So we're already up to $2,500, right? But sometimes they give you that card because they want you to impress that person, right? They give that card to Evan and say, hey, go take him fishing, or take him boating, or take him to the golf course, right? And then all expenses are paid,
Go for get all paid golf.
right?
How do they get-
Now, the other thing is, though, we gotta make sure that there's probably a limit, right? Okay, there's probably a limit. So those are all things that we gotta think about. So the first one, or one of them that you said was mileage reimbursement, all right? The rate usually is set by the IRS. I have no idea, anybody know what the mileage rate is right now? Anybody? Okay.
No.
I would guess somewhere, I know I can't even guess, okay? So it's gonna be something like 35 cents or 45 cents per mile or whatever it is. Okay, so you get that mileage and you would figure it out, all right? And then we talked about all these other travel expenses. So my hotel, meals, airfare, somebody said, taxi. So if we get into the bigger towns, or maybe we have Uber instead now, right? Rental cars, expenses and entertaining customers, we already talked about. And then porterage. What's porterage? Never heard of
Once
that?
you fly in, they bring in like your bags to the hotel.
Okay, so you're paying for what?
Here.
Basically a tip,
Your
right?
services, your
Yeah.
customer service.
So, the bellmans and those kind of people, right? The people that would take your bags at a hotel or maybe an airport. Yeah, okay, but they expect to get some of that, right? So again, then they talk about travel expenses, and obviously it's a couple of different ways. We said the one way is to go through and every time that you had an expense that weekend, you'd get a receipt, and then you'd take it back to the company at the end, and you would get a grand total, or hopefully a check back for the grand total, okay? Another way that you can do it is something called per diem. You ever heard of per diem?
I said it a couple times in class.
Okay, so what's per diem? Per day, right? So not only can you get paid for your expenses, some like actual jobs are off per diem, right? What's a job that you could get paid per diem? Think about school.
Oh, substitute teachers.
Oh,
A substitute teacher is a per diem thing. Or like if you work for one of those, what do I want to say, employment agencies, and maybe you're like a assistant, like a secretary kind of person for a couple days or whatever, that could be a per diem job too, okay? But for our thought process, we're thinking about per diem as, you know, what you're gonna get for your grand total. And again, so then the last thing that you gotta think about is, okay, so do I get the extra per diem at the end? So again, says, well, I think people would just spend it. Well, but if you think about this and you traveled all the time, maybe if you had that certain per diem, maybe you start building it up and that's how you're gonna go on vacation, right? How you're going to pay for your child's birthday or something, you know, so in some aspects, yeah, you know, certain weekends, hey, I'm gonna take the wife or husband with me, so we're gonna probably use our allotment. But other times, maybe we're going to scrounge a little bit because we got a birthday coming up, you know, or whatever it happens to be, or Christmas is a month away, so we need, you know, more presents or whatever. That makes sense? So that all would go in your mind, but you gotta know how that works in your company. Or if you're gonna run the company, how you're going to run that aspect of it. And it's totally up to you, honestly. Okay, it's kind of an extra perk, right? So if they wanna spend all their money by going to, I don't even know what a fancy restaurant is.
Or
What?
Outback Steakhouse.
We're going to Outback. Okay.
Or
Japanese.
Texas Roadhouse will get you.
Japanese steakhouse, right? All right, so if they want to do that, that's totally up to them. If they want to go to, I can't even say McDonald's all the time right now anymore, right? Because prices everywhere are getting high. But if you're going to go hit the dollar menu at 3 different places for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, maybe you save a bunch of money then. And instead of staying at the 5-star Regency Inn, you stay at the Johnson Hotel and Casino, right, or something like that. Okay? So, bless you. Okay, but maybe, hey, the other thing is in a business aspect of it, when we start looking for hotels for like track or volleyball or that, one of the big draws for us is complimentary breakfast, right? So you get that meal, but you don't necessarily have to pay for that meal.
On that state track is the best.
It is?
Oh yeah, they cook it like in front of you.
Oh, do they?
It's like a little dining room.
Right. So that makes a big difference, right? So obviously you might pay a little bit more for your hotel room, but you're getting one basically free meal with that. So that's a big deal, okay? So you might, that might be one of your stipulations, okay? This is why we're accompanying with Best Western or Marriott or wherever it happens to be, okay? So let's check a couple of these out and then you can have the rest of the time. Page 407. Letter A. Erica drove her car 986 miles in May, 35% of which were for her job. The company reimburses Erica 55 cents a mile for business use. What did Erica receive as a reimbursement for the use of her car? So the first thing they got to do is what?
35% times 986 times 155.
Perfect. 0.35 times 986 to find out how many miles, and then those miles times 0.55 for a grand total of 189.81. Exactly right. So again, in that aspect right there, the biggest thing would be how do you determine or how do you keep track of what are business miles and what are regular miles for this particular case? That'd be kind of hard sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Then people would try to say, well, I'm gonna do one business things, but I'm gonna kind of do it in the long run, right? So there's ways of getting around that too. Letter B. Ooh, Satish drove his car, oh, that's a guy, 19,000 miles last year. Of those miles, 28% were reimbursed by his company at 52 cents a mile. the IRS mileage rate for that year was 55 cents a mile. How much did Satish receive from his company for mileage? And then what amount might Satish use as a tax deduction? So this one's kind of interesting. Notice that the company's rate was 52, but the IRS was 55. So basically the first part of the question, you're going to do exactly like we did in A, right?
Yeah.
How do you figure out the second part?
Do the same thing, but then multiply
Those
it by.
miles times 0.55.
Okay, so do we want to do the entire 0.55?
What?
If you're going to do the entire 0.55 to do the second part with the IRS, then you have to do what for your tax deduction amount?
What do you mean?
Miles you
benefits
got
are-
from the 5.
Okay, so this one, we're okay with the first part, right?
Yeah.
We're going to do it exactly like. The second part says that, so I have two options of this. The first part was 0.52 for the company, and the IRS was 0.55. So you have two options. We do the first part of the problem the same way we did letter A, okay? We can do the second part just like letter A again and take 0.55 times whatever our number of miles were, okay? But if we do that, did anybody do this first part? B?
2,811 and 24 cents.
Okay, did anybody do the IRS one?
2,973 and 43 cents.
Okay, so what is the amount that I could take to my tax deduction?
The difference.
Do I want to take what?
The difference between
Yeah,
the two.
I'm going to take the difference of those two things. And whatever that answer is,
162 and 19 cents.
$162.19. Okay? So that's how much I would take, or I could apply for deduction on my taxes. Another version of that would just be to take these two and subtract them, right? So I could do 3 cents and then take 3 cents by the number of miles, and you should still get your $162.19. That's what I'm saying. You could do it either way.
Hey, what if, the one, like, 52 cents a mile, the first one, would
Yeah.
have 52 and a half a mile? What was that?
Just do 0.525. You want to include that in your calculation.
Okay,
Because otherwise, then you're screwing yourself,
Yeah.
essentially. So yeah, just put it as another decimal place. Make sense?
okay.
Okay? Everybody good then with A and B? Turn the page. This one gets a little confusing to me because of how they write the problem, so just be careful here. Oh, lordy. Poling attended a business conference in another state. His approved expenses were, he got airfare, meals, taxis, the airport parking, he got porterage, conference registration fee, and mileage to and from airport, 32 miles. So here's my question. When it says mileage to and from the airport of 32 miles, is that total?
Yeah.
Or does that mean one way? Okay. And that is correct. Hotel charges of $216, other expenses of $54. If his company pays 0.5 or 50 cents a mile for use of his personal car, how much was Poling reimbursed? So hopefully everything's pretty self-explanatory. The only extra math we have to do is what?
32 times 50 cents.
32 times 50 cents, right? Otherwise, we're just going to take all those numbers and what? Add them together. So we take 32 times 0.5, which is obviously half of 32, so $16, and then add them all up. So for Poling's business trip, he should get back how much? What? Oh, did anybody do it? Sorry. So if you added them all up, it would have been $1,459. Okay? And D, notice here, this one's a little different, so just notice this one. Susan spent 3.5 days at a conference. She was reimbursed for traveling the 315 miles to and from the conference by personal car at 52 cents a mile. So again, 315 miles to and from is the grand total, right? Don't do it 2 times. She was also paid 125 per diem. What were her total reimbursements? So when you do the per diem thing, you're taking 125 times what?
3.5.
3.5, okay? Don't screw yourself by dropping off that half.
$601.30.
$601.30, exactly right. Make sense? Okay? Any questions?
Sure, that's it.
That's it for this section.
Easy.
So, we're at the end of the chapter. So tomorrow, we'll do a quiz over, and we'll talk about what's gonna be on the quiz when I look at the quiz here in a second. So, you got about 15 minutes still.
This kid from Honduras, you just want us to look up what we're doing this morning at campus, or are you gonna
Yeah,
have anything certain special
we can, we'll talk about that,
next week?
yeah, next week.
Well, telling him to do it this weekend.